A massive police response on the streets of New York City for a terror attack underground. The suspect, identified as Akayed Ullah, detonated a device described as a low-tech pipe bomb attached to his body.
The president's policy calls for an end to chain migration. If his policy had been in place, then that attacker would not have been allowed to come in the country.
Voters head to the polls just hours from now. Roy Moore and Doug Jones facing off in an unlikely nail-biter.
I want to make America great again with President Trump. I want America great, but I want America good, and she can't be good until we go back to God.
Exclusive reports on the so-called Trump dossier.
The link between Fusion GPS and a top Justice Department official ran deeper than previously known. The wife of Bruce Orr worked for Fusion GPS last year.
Journalists make honest mistakes, and that doesn't make them fake news.
Okay. There's a very big difference between making honest mistakes and purposefully misleading the American people.
They don't correct it. They don't apologize for it. They hold everybody else to one standard and themselves to quite another.
Good morning, everybody, and straight to a Fox News alert. We're learning more about that Port Authority bomber we told you about live yesterday, who carried out his botched attack in the name of ISIS. Turns out he was known to be a real jerk. Huge attitude. Stunner.
Police swarming the wannabe terrorist Brooklyn house as his family lashes out at police.
Yep, they don't like the treatment. That's where we find Todd Pirro live. Todd, what do we know about the motive as of now as you report live from Brooklyn?
Steve, Ainsley, and Brian, good morning. That is the big question at this point in time. Right now, this Brooklyn neighborhood is extremely quiet, but yesterday, like you said, investigators were here in this neighborhood poring over every single detail of the suspected terrorist's life in an attempt to try and find that motive. His name, Akayed Ullah. He lived in Brooklyn after he entered the U.S. in 2011 from Bangladesh on a chain migration visa. That's a preferential visa available for those with family in the U.S. Ullah was a licensed cab driver from March 2012 to March 2015, but his taxi and limo license was not renewed after 2015. Law enforcement said Ullah was inspired by ISIS, but did not appear to have direct contact with the group and likely acted alone. Reports say the 27-year-old was upset with the way Muslims have been treated by the U.S. and by recent Israeli actions in Gaza. And he reportedly became radicalized by Islamic State media. Neighbors here in this Brooklyn neighborhood describe Ullah as a hermit and a loner.
The guy himself, he always had an attitude. I have a detail shop in the back. He would block the driveway. We would try to chase him, and he would have like an attitude, to move his car out of our driveway.
He was cocky.
How so?
It's just like he was better than everybody else. Like we're like belittled.
Ullah allegedly packed a 5-inch metal pipe bomb and battery pack into the right side of his jacket before setting it off at the nation's busiest bus terminal in the heart of yesterday's morning rush. He told police he made the bomb at his work, reportedly an electric company. 3 people injured in the attack have been released from the hospital. And listen to this. Through their lawyer, the suspect's family says it is outraged by police behavior following the incident, in the hours following the incident, specifically the way that family members were interrogated by police. Steve, Ainsley, Brian, back to you.
Thank you very much for the live report. Indeed, the family says that apparently the cops pulled a high school kid out of class and interrogated him without a lawyer. Also, apparently they detained a 4-year-old.
Trying to save lives and find out answers. They don't have much time.
Right, and one was complaining that a 4-year-old was out in the cold. All right, meanwhile, let's talk about how this guy got here. I'm just a little curious why he seems so angry to be in America. Well, in 2011, he had a visa. How did he get that? Because 3 or 4 of his siblings subsequently obtained a green card and became permanent U.S. residents. Ullah had 2 addresses associated with him, so he arrives in the U.S. in February 2011 with a visa and gets to stay because he had family members here.
It's called chain migration, and the president was talking yesterday. He says he wants to end this. This was his statement. Today's terror suspect entered our country through extended family chain migration, which is incompatible with national security. Congress must end chain migration. Congress must also act on my administration's other proposals to enhance domestic security. The terrible harm that this flawed system inflicts on America's security and economy has long been clear. I I am determined to improve our immigration system to put our country and our people first.
So the bomber came here on an F4 visa. He's got a permanent resident status here in the United States, which means he's got due process rights. And apparently it was his aunt or his uncle who applied for citizenship, was granted it. And here's the thing about chain migration. No restrictions on how many immigrants a citizen can sponsor. Family reunions get priority over the other forms of sponsorship. As for Bangladesh, it is not one of the nations on the list of countries where people get extreme vetting.
What happens is one of the people in the family, or all of them apply, one of them gets granted permission to come to the U.S. and they bring the whole group.
That's right.
Yeah, I think
That's
won the lottery again that's still out there. Meanwhile, in terms of people that come here, not that there's anything against people from Bangladesh, but maybe we should know who's coming and how many. There's 141,000 Bangladeshis who have come here since 2005. That is the size of the population of Dayton, Ohio. About 9.3 million foreign nationals have come to the U.S. as chain migrants over the last 11 years. So we should understand who's coming here. One person applies or wins the lotto through an application process, and next thing you know, you have dozens who follow in the wake. I'm asking you this. Are you okay with that? Because it doesn't seem like the process that leads to a secure America.
During the time period between 2005 and 2015, the government decided to count the green cards. 70% of those immigrants that came through during that 10-year span, 70% of them were family members, were part of the chain migration. They weren't the ones that actually got in. They got to come in because a family member was here. 70%.
Sure. So we're going to be talking to Sara Isgor from the Department of Justice regarding chain migration. Coming up. In the meantime, shortly after this terrorist detonated his bomb that was strapped to his chest, made with Christmas lights and essentially plans that
electric company.
He saw stuff on the internet from Inspire magazine, from the ISIS magazine. He detonated it at 7:19 yesterday. There were some cops nearby, and they took action because they saw him reaching for his cell phone. They saw that he had wires running from his shirt to his pants, and they thought, the cell phone, that's a good way to detonate another bomb. And so those are the 4 hero cops who sprang into action.
The first one that comes in, Anthony Maffordini. He's 28.
The one on the far right.
Right. And by the way, this guy, this is how fortuitous we are and New York is. Not only to have him on the force, but the fact is he's a Marine. And in the Marines, he was a bomb technician. So he understood exactly what to do. He radioed for help, and he saw the wires.
He saw the panicked commuters. He goes over to the guy with the bomb. He sees him reaching for his cell phone and realizes that could be a detonating device. So he stops him. He calls in for help. And the other guys, another guy's a Marine, another guy in the Army, 3 tours in Iraq. Another one is also an attorney.
Yeah,
so thank you to these hero cops.
That's right, because then they were able to arrest him. They secured the area, evacuated it, and stayed way past quitting time.
Drew Preston, 36 years old, 3 tours in Iraq. And as you mentioned, Ainsley, he's from the Army, with Army experience. Sean Gallagher, 26, a Marine. And Jack Collins doubles as a lawyer. How fortunate it is for us in New York to have people this qualified walking the streets. I always thought if you want to straighten out Washington, more people who serve in the military should go serve as lawmakers. How about in New York City, where the first line of defense, the tip of the spear, are law enforcement agents, and it turns out they have military experience.
I've never experienced anything like it. I've always appreciated law enforcement, of course. But living in New York, I guess it's after 9/11, just they're a family here.
Sure.
And they stick together and they protect our city in a mighty way.
Right. And these are not New York City Police Department officials and officers. These are Port Authority officers who just patrol the airports, the ports, and the bridges here in New York. Indeed, they were right in the right place at the right time yesterday. Meanwhile, it's Judgment Day down in the state of Alabama. In just a couple of hours, voters there are going to head to the polls to choose a new U.S. Senator.
Roy Moore and Doug Jones are facing off in that nail-biter down there that has a lot of nationwide consequences.
Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, D.C. with a fight to the finish that brought out Barkley and Bannon.
That's right, guys. Good morning. Look, the last time Alabama voters elected a Democrat to the Senate, Bill Clinton got elected president 25 years ago. But despite the deep red state, embattled Republican Roy Moore finds himself trailing Doug Jones by 10 points in Fox's latest poll as President Trump tried to rally the base yesterday with that robocall. And last night, White House strategist Steve Bannon flying in for a final rally. Now, Moore, who has defiantly denied the allegations against him, took to the mics with a message for his detractors.
We talk about draining the swamp. It's difficult to drain the swamp when you're up to your neck in alligators. I want to make America great again with President Trump.
Meanwhile, Jones got some outside help from former President Obama and Vice President Biden recording robocalls, and former NBA star and native son Charles Barkley flying in for a rally as Jones continued to frame this election as a referendum on something larger than just one candidate.
I think it's time that we say no more to putting people down, that we say no more to treating people as second-class citizens. It's just time, folks, that we say no more.
So here we go. Polls open in less than 2 hours, 7 a.m. local, and certainly a race that has national implications, guys, because Democrats have not fared well so far this year in these special elections.
Let's see this time. All right, Griff Jenkins live in our nation's capital. We thank you very much.
Thanks, Griff.
All right, meanwhile, Julian Milley's been scrambled to tell us the latest, and surprise, even though you lost your quarterback, the Eagles lost their quarterback and still have playoff hopes alive, you came to work.
You know, I'm very heartbroken about this, Brian. You didn't have to remind me.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Is the backup good?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Falls.
he's fine. We just don't have a backup to the backup. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, we do have a Fox News alert to get to. Some breaking news right now. New York City boosting security in reaction to the Port Authority bombing. There will now be an increased police presence at high-profile locations, including airports, bridges, tunnels, and mass transit systems. Other big cities across the U.S. are following suit. In Boston, there will be an increased police presence at all transit stops. And in Philadelphia, police are stepping up patrols across mass transit lines. New overnight, the Department of Justice requesting an emergency stay to halt the acceptance of transgender recruits into the military. It comes months after President Trump tweeted the military could not be burdened with the medical costs and disruption. Last month, a federal judge ruled against the change.
The Department of Justice is currently reviewing the legal options to ensure that the president's directive can be implemented.
The Pentagon says as of now, transgender enlistment will go on starting January 1st. Hanukkah begins tonight at sundown. The Festival of Lights celebrates the rededication of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The menorah miraculously burning for 8 days, even though there was only enough oil for one night. Hundreds will gather this evening for the national menorah lighting on the ellipse just across from the White House. Last week, President Trump hosted his first Hanukkah celebration a day after recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. That's a look at your headlines. I'll send it back to you guys as I go back and cry now because Brian so kindly reminded me.
I apologize. Work the sports into the news. All right.
Happy Hanukkah. If you're Jewish and you're watching, happy Hanukkah.
Tonight, first night. Meanwhile, how can we get answers from that wannabe Port Authority terrorist? He was a terrorist. Dr. James Mitchell interrogated the mastermind of 9/11. He's going to join us live next.
Then Dallas Police. All right, we're back with the Fox News alert, and we are learning more about the wannabe homicide-suicide bomber behind yesterday's subway explosion. The 27-year-old came here from Bangladesh 2011 on a visa available for certain relatives of certain citizens because he had relatives here already. Former CIA interrogator Dr. James Mitchell is the author of Enhanced Interrogation and helped the CIA put together this program that we hope is being exercised to some degree right now with this guy. First off, Dr. Mitchell, we saw 2 weeks ago that ISIS warned about a Times Square attack just 2 weeks ago. Santa Claus, Times Square in the video. Is this it?
Probably not. I would say, though, you can't connect the dots if you don't collect the dots. And one of the problems that we have cutting back on the surveillance like we are is we really don't know whether this is it or not in a lot of cases because we're not collecting the same kinds of materials we used to collect. But I doubt that this is it. It's too amateurish.
Dr. Mitchell, what would you be asking him? Evidently, he's speaking enough to say, this is how I made the bomb. This is what ticked me off. This is how I came here. He's giving a certain amount out. Where do you go from here if I put him in front of you?
I'd be interested really in perishable information that you could use to create actionable intelligence. I'd want to know who his contacts were in Bangladesh, for example. There are ISIS affiliates in Bangladesh, and just as early as November, Australia issued a warning because of the number of ISIS cells over there. This man's from Bangladesh. He's got friends in Bangladesh. He's probably communicating with people in Bangladesh, and I doubt that his radicalization happened simply from a YouTube video.
Right.
So I'd be wanting to follow up on on that sort of stuff. You know, are there additional bombs? Are there additional people? Stuff, because you don't want people dumping their cell phones, destroying their SIM cards, wiping their hard drives, changing their address books. You want to get that perishable information as quickly as you can.
Evidently, he made a number of trips back and forth to Bangladesh. That's not cheap. How does a guy come here, drive a cab because his relatives are here already, and go back and forth 5 times to Bangladesh? Who's financing that?
Well, that would be one of the questions that I would be asking, right? Because if you find the answer to that and it turns out that he's being funded by one of these terror groups, then you've got a way into their finances and you can start following them. The thing that's distracting about this is that the focus in a lot of cases is really on the crime that he's committed, right? He's tried to set off a bomb, and now he appears to be confessing. Well, one of the things that we noticed when we were interrogating people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Abu Zubaydah and those is they have no problem telling you about their past crimes, because as long as you focus on the past crimes, you're not focusing on information to stop future attacks. And so I would take that information that you need to take to be able to prosecute this guy. But I wouldn't be distracted by that.
20 seconds. Can you tell me if you would read him his Miranda rights and put him through our court system, or put him into the brig and question him for a great period of time?
I think he swore an oath of allegiance to the United States when he became a U.S. citizen, if he was. If he's on a green card, this really doesn't apply. But I think he's an unlawful enemy combatant. He should be treated like an unlawful enemy combatant and see a military commission if they can ever get that straightened out, and then punished for that.
I 100% agree. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Dr. Mitchell, thanks so much.
No, thanks for having me on.
Okay, coming up straight ahead, some critics turning on President Trump. But our next guest says he's doing exactly what he campaigned on. And a marathon runner collapsing at the end of a race.
Quick headlines for you. New overnight, a U.S. service member is now dead and 2 more are injured after a vehicle incident in Afghanistan. Military officials say that they were not engaged with an enemy. The fallen service member has not yet been identified, and the conditions of those injured in the incident are not yet known at this point. I hate that, especially Christmas time. And a Houston teenager is facing 20 years in prison for his alleged ties to ISIS. The feds say the 18-year-old wanted to launch an attack on U.S. soil after 2 failed attempts to join the terror group in Syria. He's also accused of distributing instructions for how to make bombs and assault rifles. Steve?
Thank you very much, Ainsley. In a new op-ed, our next guest challenges Democrats who are calling for President Trump's resignation. It's titled, "Why Would We Abandon Trump? He's doing what he said he would do." And the op-ed argues Democrats were once guilty of sweeping under the rug the same behavior they are now accusing the president of. Here with more is the publisher and editor of the Hillsborough Times-Gazette out in Ohio, Gary Abernathy, who's Skyping us from his office. Good morning to you, Gary.
Yes. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much. I understand because your paper endorsed Donald Trump before the election in November. A lot of people say, okay, you've seen what he's done so far. Do you regret your endorsement? Yeah. What do you tell him?
Well, that's exactly right. We get that question a lot. You always get people writing op-eds saying, when are Trump supporters going to desert him? And my response is, anyone who voted for President Trump in the last election has been given no reason to desert him. I mean, what has changed about him? The tweets, what some people consider the over-the-top behavior. And then on top of that, he's actually tried to keep his campaign promises. So as a newspaper, no, we've been given no reason to endorse Trump. If you supported him then, why wouldn't you support him now?
You, in your op-ed, Gary, write that President Trump is a different kind of president, and he takes some getting used to because he actually does, as you just mentioned, keep those campaign promises. On the campaign trail, he talked about the border. He talked about Jerusalem, which he did last week. He talked about the Affordable Care Act and taxes. So we shouldn't be surprised that it's all happening.
No, not at all. I mean, again, as someone who's been an observer for a long time, I worked in politics for a while, it's refreshing to see someone actually campaign on something, and then when they become president, try hard to do it. And I think that's what upsets a lot of critics, is because, a lot of people, Steve, thought that when he was campaigning, Trump would pivot. He would become a different kind of president.
Right.
Well, if he did that, he would become just like everybody else and probably lose his base of support.
And never-Trumpers are waiting for his supporters to wake up. But his supporters, what the never-Trumpers don't get is the supporters like what he's doing, you say.
Yeah, I think that they do. I think that's why they voted for him. And, you know, I mean, the fact is a lot of criticism that has come President Trump's way from a lot of people on certain issues that we now see kind of the hypocrisy on. You know, none of that's going to hurt President Trump. So, again, I think that it's refreshing to see someone actually come in. Hasn't always been successful because Congress hasn't yet always cooperated. Hopefully on the tax plan it's going to be different. But to see someone come in and try to do what they campaigned on doing and said they were going to do.
Sure. Gary, and you mentioned this in your op-ed as well, many people mentioned the tweets. Sometimes they don't seem very presidential, but you argue they seem very Donald Trump. That's the point.
Yeah, they are very Donald Trump. I mean, I'm like everybody else. Sometimes he tweets things that make me cringe. I wish he wouldn't do it. And part of me starts to say, gee, I wish he would just kind of, you know, become more like other candidates or more presidential. That seems to be the favorite phrase. But the fact is that wouldn't be Donald Trump. That wouldn't be the guy who people voted for, who won the popular vote in 30 states out of our 50 states.
There you go. He is the publisher and editor of the Hillsborough Times-Gazette out in Ohio. Gary Abernathy, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Coming up live on this Tuesday, Dallas police have a shortage of officers, and the chief is blaming the young people, millennials. You got to hear why coming up. And all eyes are on the state of Alabama for today's special Senate election. Pete Hegseth is live in Mobile talking with voters who are hungry.
Well, hungry, of course. It's the spot of tea here in Mobile, Alabama. So if you're here, come on out. I'm at a table of Roy Moore supporters, two of which are going out to the polls to vote for him. One is a poll worker, actually. The other one would go.
Well, all eyes are on the state of Alabama today as voters head to the polls there in that special election to fill Jeff Sessions' vacant Senate seat. Republican Roy Moore facing off against Democrat Doug Jones.
So what do the voters think? Pete Hegseth is talking to them. He is live at a place called Spot of Tea. It's a restaurant in Mobile, Alabama. Hey, Pete.
That's right. Good morning, Ainsley. And that if there's one thing we've learned in the last year, it doesn't matter what the pundits think and the hosts think in New York City. What matters are what the people think and the voters on the ground think as they cast their ballot. A very consequential Senate vote here in Alabama today. Polls open in just a couple of hours. And we've got two tables. We've got a pretty mixed restaurant here. We've got your Doug Jones supporters and your Roy Moore supporters who we're going to get to. First, we're talking to Dr. John Dixon and Webb here, both of which are supporting Doug Jones. Sir, if you would, tell me why you support him.
The issues are education, jobs, and health care. Doug Jones speaks to those routinely. Roy Moore is talking about that yearbook.
Now, he is talking about that yearbook, which means for the first time in generations, and maybe not generations, in a generation, this is a Senate seat Democrats could actually win. Is that why there's so much enthusiasm?
There's great support for Doug Jones for that reason. He's also a great candidate.
Got it. Webb, why do you support Doug Jones?
Even if I wasn't a far-left card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America, I wouldn't vote for Roy Moore. Roy is a pedophile, and I don't think he's fit to be on an episode of Chapo Trap House, let alone the U.S. Senate.
So you're not mincing words this morning?
Not at all.
Not at all. So you've got a couple of Doug Jones supporters here who clearly think this is a chance to beat a Republican in a state that's gone red for decades. Now we're going to go to a couple of Roy Moore supporters who feel like, well, this is a chance to maintain a seat because the balance of the U.S. Senate is at issue. I'm here with Donna. Donna, how you doing? Donna, Stephanie, and Courtney. Thanks for being here this morning. Donna, you're going to work a poll this morning as well. You're supporting Roy Moore. A lot of accusations. You just heard it there about Roy Moore. That's what's at stake here.
Yeah, and let me tell you, Roy Moore is a man of integrity. And he's been vetted in this state for years. This is something that, when all these accusations came out, I looked into it and I looked at his personal secretary, his assistant, women that he dated. They have all, come forward and said that through the years that he has stood for integrity, and he's been very respectful for people. And these accusations are really a political hit job.
Do you feel like the accusations are going to hurt voter turnout for Republicans here in Alabama?
Possibly, but you can see, women in Alabama are not stupid. we're very smart. And we, most of us that have conservative values and that really love our president and want somebody to go in there and support our president. That's really what it comes down to. Doug Jones is not going to support our president.
Stephanie, that's a great point. How much of this election is about President Trump and his agenda and making sure it happens?
Well, you know, Alabama showed. I mean, we showed up for President Trump, and I just really think that we'll show up for Roy Moore. I mean,
what is it that you support most about him?
Well, he has the conservative values. I'm always going to stand behind the person who's pro-life. And that's what he is.
Absolutely. Courtney, you can't vote, but you debate with your history teacher regularly.
Oh, yeah.
What do you make of this whole so much focus on a Senate run here in Alabama?
I think it's really interesting to see how people are very much into what's going on in Alabama, even though they're not here and not experiencing it for themselves. So I think the people of Alabama very much may not just fall into what they think is going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think, guys, that's a common theme we're hearing from that table and this one. Listen, there's plenty of noise nationally about this race. What matters, the only thing that matters is what happens when Donna and Stephanie and others walk, and the doctor over there and Webb walk into the voter booth and make their choice. That's ultimately who they will send to Washington to represent them. They don't want pundits telling them who should be their U.S. senator. Both sides very passionate this morning. Voter turnout will matter a lot here in Alabama. But here in Mobile, if you're at a spot of tea or around here, come on out and join us for Fox and Friends.
And a lot of people are afraid to be criticized no matter who they say they're voting for, so they just keep it to themselves, and they certainly don't tell the pollsters the truth if last election was any a learned moment.
Have you seen that to be the case? Have you talked to people who say, I don't want to go on camera because I don't want to tell who I'm voting for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of that. I mean, there's a recognition that some people have used this visual. I'm going to hold my nose, and I'm going to go into the ballot box and vote for my values, not for the person. But you also hear others who are passionate about Roy Moore. So it's a mixed bag when you talk to them.
So it's not anti-Pete Hegseth. It's just more the controversy with the
There's some of that, too, Brian. There's some of that, too, yes.
All right. Reporting live from Spotted Tea in Mobile. Pete, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. Let's hand it over to Jillian. She has a Fox News alert for us this morning. Jillian?
That's right. Good morning. Good morning to you at home. Breaking right now, we've just learned the mayor of San Francisco, Ed Lee, died early this morning at the age of 65. The city says he was surrounded by family and friends in the hospital when he passed away shortly after 1 a.m. No cause of death was reported. Lee was the city's 43rd mayor. A woman caught smoking in an airplane bathroom threatens to kill passengers when flight attendants tell her to sit down.
I swear if we don't land, I will kill everybody on this plane. I will kill everybody on this plane.
That is a frightening scene. The Southwest Airlines crew forced to restrain the woman until they landed in Sacramento. Police arresting her for tampering with a smoke detector, a federal offense. She claims she was smoking to calm anxiety. I'm not sure that it worked. The Dallas Police Department is facing a shortage in officers, and now the chief says millennials are partly to blame.
We have nights, weekends, and holidays, and those are some of the things that are not necessarily attractive to the millennials who want all days off and to be the chief in 6 months.
Chief Renee Hall says she needs to hire 250 recruits this year, so the department has to come up with new strategies to make the job more appealing to young people. That could include accepting candidates with minor drug history. A teen becomes a hero, carrying a collapsing marathon runner across the finish line to win the race. 17-year-old Ariana Luderman was running with Chandler Self in the Dallas Marathon when she collapsed. Ariana helped push her forward so Self would come in first place. And that's not the teen's only selfless act. She also raises money for homeless children and was honored as one of Texas's top volunteers. Cool story. So look at your headlines. Back down to you guys.
All right, Jillian, thank you. It is the most wonderful time of the year. It's also very historic. Each year, the White House Historical Association releases a brand new Christmas tree ornament honoring one of our past presidents.
And this year's honors our 32nd president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
And here to tell us more, as he does every year, is the president of the White House Historical Association, Stuart McLaurin. Thank you, Stuart, for being here again.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here again. And we have 5 of our 37 ornaments that we've produced since 1981. You can get them all on our website, whitehousehistory.org. And this is this year's. It honors Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and it has the beautiful, strong gold eagle.
Go ahead and leave it back in there, and we'll zoom way in on it.
Sure. The beautiful, strong gold eagle that was on the front of his 1933 inaugural platform. It has his monogram beneath that and the 2 flags with the 48 stars. And it's in the shape of the vintage tabletop radio that many Americans, millions of Americans, listen to the Fireside Chat.
But with the gold, I'm thinking Trump. You know, I'm feeling Trump in that.
Well, you know, we are a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization, and we've worked with every president and first lady since we were founded by Mrs. Kennedy in 1961, and we have a wonderful relationship with Mrs. Trump and her team.
When do you design them? I know. So many
well, about a year in advance. In fact, we just confirmed the design for next year's ornament, which will be Truman. We honor the president sequentially, so we don't have to decide who's next. And here are a few of the former ones. Last year was Herbert Hoover.
You were here for that?
I was. The wonderful story of the Christmas Eve fire at the White House in 1929. This is a terrific one. It's a commemorative. We pause every few years and have an honor a significant day or individual related to the White House. This honors the Irish architect James Hoban, and crushed into that resin is actual stone from the quarry in Aquia, Virginia, where the stone for the White House came from.
What do you use the funds for?
We are a nonprofit organization, and we support conservation, preservation, and restoration at the White House.
Sure.
Those beautiful staterooms, we keep them that way. We acquire art and furnishings for the permanent White House collection, and we're a private partner. These are all non-government funding.
And just these last two real quick, Lincoln?
Lincoln, 1999. That's the George Healey portrait that now hangs above the mantel in the state dining room. Calvin Coolidge was our first president to light the national Christmas tree, and that one actually lights up on the back. There's a little switch.
And of course, not only this year's is available, but you've got all of them
37.
going back.
You know, a lot of people now get a separate tree and have all 37 ornaments.
And
you get them all.
lesson.
That's right. Each one comes with a booklet that tells the history of that ornament and that presidency.
But we have a tree shortage, so this year let's just combine it with one and save a tree for somebody else.
This is a picture on the booklet for this year. You have President Roosevelt with his grandson.
That's so cool. My wife has been collecting these since the Reagan years.
They're our favorite.
Check it out, whitehousehistory.org. Stuart,
thank you very much. Always great to be with you. Merry Christmas to all of you.